if you don't have the money by tomorrow, I'm tearing this bakery down." The thick, booming voice of the landlord easily drowned out the thunderstorm raging outside. Henderson slammed a stack of overdue loan papers onto the flour-dusted counter. He was a massive guy who smelled of cheap cigars and pure greed. He sneered at the young woman, trembling on the other side of the register. "And since you can't pay, you're going to come work off your debt at my house." Sophie bit her lip so hard it almost bled. She stood her ground, blocking the doorway to the back room, where her sick mother was resting. Henderson raised his heavy wooden cane, ready to smash a tray of freshly baked bread. Suddenly, a heavy, grease-stained hand shot out from the shadows and grabbed his wrist. A man in a faded mechanic's uniform two-stepped forward. His eyes were dead calm, but they carried a storm of their own. "I'll be paying her debt today." We often wonder why good people have to go through the darkest storms. But sometimes, the universe is just setting the stage for a miracle. If you believe God always has a way of protecting the good-hearted, leave the declaration, "I believe in justice and love," in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more stories that restore your faith in humanity. Now, let's get back to the bakery. Tucked between towering steel skyscrapers, Sophie's little bake shop looked like a relic from another time. It was a tiny, run-down building, but it smelled like heaven. The scent of rising dough, roasted garlic, and melted butter was the only warm thing left in this neighborhood. Sophie was 25, but her hands were covered in burn marks and calluses from the old brick oven. She had been carrying the weight of the world since her father passed away. The hospital bills had absolutely buried them. Her mother's lungs were failing and required constant oxygen. Sophie worked 18-hour shifts just to keep the lights on and buy the medication. Her only real asset was her dad's secret sourdough recipe. Every loaf she baked was an act of pure love. But the real world doesn't always care about love. Henderson certainly didn't. He was the most ruthless real estate developer in the city. He had already bought up the entire block. He wanted to bulldoze Sophie's bakery, to build a massive parking garage for his new casino. He had purchased the predatory loan her father had signed in desperation years ago, and he was squeezing her dry. On purpose. Across town in a completely different reality, a man named Arthur was drowning in his own kind of misery. Arthur was the billionaire CEO of a global Michelin star restaurant empire. But none of that money mattered to him anymore. 3 years ago, a drunk driver had taken his wife's life. Since that awful day, Arthur had completely lost his taste for food. He hated the gold-leafed steaks and the hollow fake smiles of high society. To escape the paparazzi and his own crushing grief, he handed the company over to his board of directors. He packed away his tailored suits and his expensive watches. He put on a pair of steel-toed boots and a stained work shirt. He started taking odd jobs repairing commercial ovens in the poorest parts of the city. He just wanted to be invisible. He wanted to be around honest, hard-working people. Most importantly, he wanted to protect his 6-year-old daughter Lily. Since the accident, Lily had completely stopped speaking. She had withdrawn into her own silent world, terrified of everything. Fate finally brought these two broken families together. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the rain was coming down in sheets. Sophie's 40-year-old oven had just let out a terrible screeching noise before dying completely. Arthur pushed open the door to the bakery, holding a heavy toolbox in one hand and Lily's small hand in the other. The shop was freezing, but the lingering smell of yeast made it feel like a real home. Sophie didn't judge his dirty clothes or his messy hair. She just offered him a warm, tired smile and pointed him to the kitchen. While Arthur was on his back, wrestling with a rusted gas valve, Sophie noticed the little girl standing by the door. Lily looked cold and terrified of the loud thunder. Sophie quietly stepped away from the counter. She pulled a warm, flaky croissant from the display case. She knelt down to Lily's eye level and gently held it out. Lily hesitated and hid behind a chair. But the smell of the warm butter was just too comforting. She stepped forward, took the pastry. And took a small bite. For the first time in 3 years. The corners of Lily's mouth curled up. She smiled. Arthur slid out from under the oven. Just in time to see it. His breath caught in his throat. He watched this exhausted, debt-ridden baker gently wipe a crumb from his daughter's cheek. In that split second, the billionaire realized something profound. This tiny, crumbling bakery had the one ingredient his 5-star empire was missing: pure, unconditional kindness. But the peace didn't last. The front door crashed open, slamming violently against the wall. Henderson marched in, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards. He didn't even bother to wipe the mud off his expensive leather shoes. "Time's up, sweetheart," Henderson barked. He tapped his cane against the glass pastry case, until it cracked. 20 grand right now. Or I'm changing the locks and calling the cops. Hearing the shouting, Sophie's mother tried to get out of bed in the back room. She stumbled into the doorway, gripped her chest, and collapsed to the floor in a violent coughing fit. Sophie screamed and dropped to her knees, holding her mother's frail body. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at the landlord. She begged him for just one more week. She told him the local school was paying for a huge catering order on Friday. Henderson just laughed out loud. "A week? Do I look like a charity to you?" He stepped forward and deliberately crushed a dropped piece of bread under his heel. "You're out on the street tomorrow, and you owe me for the rest of your miserable life." That was the exact moment. The mechanic stood up. Arthur slowly wiped the black grease off his hands with a dirty rag. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I said, I'll be paying her debt today," Arthur repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority. Henderson turned around and burst out laughing. "You? A filthy grease monkey is going to cover a $20,000 debt?" He pointed his cane right at Arthur's chest. "What are you gonna do? Sell your kidneys? Get out of my building before I have my boys throw you through the window." The arrogance of cruel people is truly blinding. They never realize who they are dealing with, until it is far too late. If you believe God always has a way of protecting the good-hearted, leave the declaration, "I believe in justice and love," in the comments below. Arthur didn't say a single word. In response to the insult, he didn't need to. He calmly reached into the front pocket of his grease-stained overalls. He didn't pull out a wallet or a wad of cash. He pulled out a single, solid metal black card. It was an American Express Centurion card. The ultimate symbol of limitless wealth that you can't just apply for. He tossed it onto the flour-covered counter. It landed with a heavy, sharp thud that echoed in the quiet room. "Swipe it," Arthur said, his voice cold as ice. "Take the 20,000 for her debt. And take another 50,000. As compensation for your disgusting behavior in front of a child." Henderson's arrogant smile completely vanished. He dealt with wealthy clients all the time, so he knew exactly what that card meant. His face turned pale, and he started sweating profusely. "Where did you steal this? Who exactly are you?" Before Arthur could answer, the screech of heavy tires echoed from the street outside. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom slammed on its brakes right in front of the bakery. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out, holding a thick leather briefcase. He ignored the rain, rushed into the shop, and bowed deeply toward the mechanic. "Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the delay," the assistant said breathlessly. "The acquisition paperwork for the downtown commercial sector is fully complete." The assistant opened the briefcase on a nearby table. It wasn't just cash inside. It was the official contract, proving Arthur had just bought Henderson's entire real estate firm. Arthur picked up the contract and tossed it directly at Henderson's chest. The heavy stack of papers scattered all over the floor. "As of 10 minutes ago, this building, this block, and your entire company belong to me," Arthur stated. "You are officially fired. And my legal team has already forwarded your predatory loan records to the district attorney. Get out of my sight before I have you arrested for trespassing." Henderson's massive frame seemed to shrink. His legs gave out. And he collapsed onto his knees. Right in the middle of the spilled flour. He had lost everything. In less than 5 minutes. He tried to apologize, begging for a second chance. But Arthur didn't even look at him. The 2 bodyguards realized the shift in power, and quietly slipped out the back door, leaving their former boss to crawl out. In complete disgrace. The light had finally returned to this little bakery. If you believe God always has a way of protecting the good-hearted, leave the declaration, "I believe in justice and love," in the comments below. Once the police escorted Henderson away, a stunning silence fell over the room. Sophie stood frozen behind the counter, staring at the mechanic in disbelief. Arthur turned to her, and the terrifying authority in his eyes instantly melted into genuine warmth. He picked up a clean napkin, and gently wiped a streak of flour off her forehead. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you the truth, Sophie," he whispered. "I came to this part of town, looking for a flavor my 5-star restaurants had completely lost. I found it right here, in your oven. Your kindness saved my soul. And it brought back my daughter's smile." Arthur didn't just clear Sophie's debt that day. He brought in the best pulmonary specialists in the country, to treat her mother. But the most beautiful part of this story is what he did with the bakery. He didn't tear it down, or turn it into some flashy, soulless modern cafe. He knew the magic was in the rustic brick walls and the old family recipe. With Arthur's incredible resources and vision, Mother's Heart Bakery expanded globally. They kept the exact same traditional baking methods, but on a massive scale. Sophie's Humble Bread became the exclusive supplier for all of Arthur's Michelin star restaurants worldwide. Over the next year, spending every day together kneading dough and sharing quiet moments, their broken hearts slowly healed. Sophie gave Arthur the warm, loving home he thought he had lost forever, and Arthur became the unshakable protector she had always deserved. Exactly 1 year after that stormy afternoon, a beautiful fairy tale wedding took place. It wasn't held in a massive cathedral or a luxury resort. It was held right in the flower garden, behind the old bakery. The air smelled of fresh roses, roasted garlic, and warm sourdough. Sophie looked absolutely radiant in a simple white dress, holding Arthur's hands tightly. Little Lily, wearing a beautiful angel dress, happily ran down the aisle tossing flower petals. And for the very first time, Lily looked up at Sophie and called her mom. There wasn't a single dry eye in the garden. All the poor neighbors Sophie used to feed for free were there, cheering and crying tears of joy. "We just witnessed a true miracle, built on love and sacrifice." If you believe God always has a way of protecting the good-hearted, leave the declaration, "I believe in justice and love," in the comments below. Perseverance through the darkest storms will always lead you to the sweetest harvest. A resilient father who plants seeds of love will always reap extraordinary miracles. No amount of cruel power can ever defeat people who live with honor and responsibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel to help us warm millions of hearts every single day. If you believe God always has a way of protecting the good-hearted, leave the declaration, "I believe in justice and love," in the comments below. I will see you in the next story.